Okay. Let's try this again. Let's just check we're all live. Sorry about that, and sorry for being a bit late. Facebook is saying no to me today. All right. Okay, here we are. So, on Boss Your Week this week, we are covering the much requested topic of how to say no. Now, why is this important? It's really important to be really comfortable saying no, because there's a favourite thing that I always say to all of my clients constantly, and that is, if you're saying yes to something, what are you saying no to? You know, every time we say yes to something, there's always a no at the other side. So we really need to be really intentional about what we're saying yes to and what we're saying no to, so that we do all of the things that are really important to us and the things that make the most impact for us and for the people around us, and the things that get us to our goals. It's also really important to know how to say no, because if you say yes to everything, chances are you're probably not going to be able to come through on all your yeses, and people will stop trusting you. And trust is the absolute basis of all relationships. You can also lose trust with yourself. I'm sure we've all felt that feeling when we keep making a commitment to ourselves and then we don't do it, and that kind of bad feeling that comes up because of that. So it's really important to get our yeses right and to get our nos right, and to make room for the yeses that we really want to say yes to. We have to say a lot of nos. And there's kind of a lot of anecdotal evidence about the really important people in this world. There's not important, sorry. The really kind of successful people in this world are extremely good at saying no, and say no to almost everything. So in this session, I am going to, nearer the end, give you some ideas of how to say no, as in the words that you can use to say no. And I've got some scripts that I can pass on to you as well. I'll let you know later in the video. But before we talk about the actual words that we need to say, we need to take a bit of a step back and think about what saying no means to us. Because if it was just a matter of the words that you say, we all would have learned to say no ages ago, and you wouldn't be here listening to me. And by the way, if you are here watching this video, if you could give it a heart or a like, or write a comment, or say hello, or if you're on the replay, put hashtag replay. It just helps the algorithm and helps other people to see it. So, regarding this inner work, the very first thing that we need to do when trying to get better at saying no is to really think about how we feel about saying no in the first place. What are our beliefs around saying no? Why is it that we oftentimes feel uncomfortable saying no? What's behind that? And generally what it is the way that we've been brought up by our parents, by the people around us, by the relationships we've made as we've grown up, by the people that have been important to us in our lives in other ways, by our bosses, by our friends, the messages that we're getting from the media and that are kind of all around us in our culture. When I think back, my mum is super amazing. She's very inspirational, and she is a woman who she worked in the NHS her whole life. Her whole life has been in service. So NHS her whole life. She was always on the parent-teacher associations at school. Then she became governor. Then she became chairman of the governors, or chairperson of the governors. And she was very involved in her church. So she did all sorts of volunteering stuff around the church. She used to volunteer at other churches as well that weren't her church. She used to run pensioners' coffee mornings. If there was a cake stall to be run at the school, she was on it. If there were cakes to be made for a cake stall, she was making them. She was fundraising here, there and everywhere. She was one of those people that did all of these things, super inspirational. And then she had there's four of us, four kids in my family. And for a long period of time, she was a stay-at-home mum, and there was nothing that she wouldn't do for us. And she ran our house like an absolute boss. And is it therefore any wonder that I turned into a person who finds it incredibly difficult to say no to anything. And this is absolutely no criticism to my mum at all. I think quite a lot of our mums are like this. They've come from a kind of an age where gender norms were as they were, and hopefully we're beginning to change those a bit. But this is what's come up for us in our childhoods, and this is what sits with us quite often. She never sat down for a second. And you know, if anybody needed a volunteer for something, she was the one putting her hand up. And then this is definitely what I have brought into my life, to the extent that I can never, before I worked on this, I could never say no to anything. If anybody kind of mentioned to me that they had any kind of challenge, even if they weren't looking for help, my first thought would be, oh, there's a challenge. How can I fix this? What can I do to help? So I'd be like offering help even when somebody wasn't asking for help in the first place. And you know, if you are in a group of people and someone asks for a volunteer, even if I was sitting there going, don't say yes, don't say yes, don't say yes, if the silence went on a bit too long, I couldn't help myself. I'd have to put my hand up and say yes. And so this is an area that I have had to work on so very, very hard. And I still need to be very intentional about saying no to things, even now, because I think when you've had decades of being a person who says yes to everything, it takes time and it takes effort to start saying no. So a really good place to start is, as I say, thinking about what does saying no mean to you? Does saying no make you feel like you're lazy, or you're not contributing, or you're failing in some way, or you're not being a community member in some way, or whatever it is? Just sit down, have a bit of a journal for 5 minutes and think about how it feels to you to say no. If I said to you that the very next time your boss asks you to do something, or the very next time your child asks you something, or the very next time your partner asks you to do something, you have to do it no matter what. You have to say no matter what. What comes up for you if you imagine that scenario? So have a think about that. And then when you've journaled that and had a thought about the things that saying no bring up for you, ask yourself if those kind of feelings and beliefs, are they serving you? They might be, sometimes they might be. Or are they holding you back? Sometimes they might be holding you back. And if they are holding you back, what new beliefs about saying no would you like to have? Because we can change our beliefs. It's not easy and it takes time, but you can change beliefs. So maybe just journal down what you'd like your new beliefs around saying no to be. Now, I've got a few kind of mindset shifts for you on saying no, which might help with this process. So one thing to ask yourself, if there's a specific kind of time that you find really hard to say no, keep that in mind. What would the very worst be? What's the very worst that could happen if you said no in that situation? Really kind of catastrophize it out and have a think about what the worst that can happen is. Quite often, not really as big as the weird feeling we have would have us believe. We often feel like we dread saying no to something, and actually in the event, it's not that big a deal. Maybe you upset somebody for a short while. It's Glennon Doyle said, we spend so much time trying not to disappoint other people that we keep disappointing ourselves, and that our job is to start not disappointing ourselves and start disappointing other people instead, which is an interesting way of looking at it. I also encourage you to think about, how do you feel when people say no to you? When people say no to me, sometimes, it depends what it is, sometimes I might get an initial little flash of, oh, that's annoying. But do I think about it for days afterwards? Do I hate them forever? Probably not. So we often have a bit of a spotlight effect, and we kind of think if we say no to somebody, oh my goodness, it's going to be this catastrophe. But actually, they're probably not that bothered. It's worth thinking about. Another way of looking at saying no is that when you say no, you're actually opening up opportunities for other people to do things. If you don't put your hand up to volunteer, someone else will get that opportunity. If you don't do that task at work, someone else can do that task, and maybe that's the step that they need to take to open up their skills and open up their career and take on more responsibility. I said earlier that I'm very prone to kind of jumping in and trying to fix things for people. Well, that's not always particularly empowering. It's partly my superpower. I'm great at helping people. That's great, but sometimes you can help too much, and especially when you think of your kids. You know, if you did everything for them all the time, they'd never learn anything, and it's the same with adults as well. Another thing to think about is that you can definitely influence how the other person receives your no. You can do that with the words that you use, and I'll help you with that a bit in a second. But it's not, you can't control how they receive it. And even further than that, it's not your responsibility. Other people's feelings aren't your responsibility. So you can kind of craft your no's to be as kind of polite as you can, but you can't control how they feel about it, and neither should you. And that's kind of their journey to take. So that's kind of like looking at the inner work and having a bit of a mindset shift on saying no. I've got some kind of basic rules about the best way to say no. And the basic rules are this. Be polite. Always good to be polite, but be firm. No whiffle waffling around and kind of saying, oh, maybe I could do this, all this kind of business. Don't apologise. You could say at the beginning, oh, I'm sorry, but I can't do that. But no kind of big like, oh, I'm so sorry, I feel really bad about it. I would have really loved to do it, but. And then that goes on to the next thing, which is don't over explain. This is like me. I didn't want to say no, so I would try and couch it in a long kind of winded, apologetic over explanation. And you know what? The end message is the same, just no. And that's all the person needs to hear, really. They just need to hear the no. And the danger that I always used to get into is if I was like over explaining, I'd start giving them other avenues to ask me to do things, and they can start arguing with you about your reason, but actually you're just trying to say no. So the number of times I tried to say no, but then kind of weakened it with the way that I explained it, and then ended up doing the thing that I'd wanted to say no to in the first place, which is a horrible feeling, isn't it, when you wanted to say no and you get persuaded out of it, and then you feel really cross with yourself. So be polite, be firm, don't apologise, and don't over explain. So it's easy to say that, isn't it? But what I found was, because I was such a chronic yeser, I needed to be a bit geeky about this. And what I did for myself was, this is really geeky, but I think it's going to help you, is I literally wrote out lots of different ways that I could say no in different situations, and I practiced them and I learnt them so that when the situation came up, they just like came out of my mouth instead of me going, oh, and just saying yes in the end. Now, I have these in my kind of private notes because this is something I had to do for myself a while back. But I did pull together all of my work-related ones into a PDF, which I can share with you. So basically, they're scripts for saying no to meetings, to tasks, saying no to your boss, saying no to all sorts of different things, and saying them in different ways, because sometimes you might want to say no to something, but you are prepared to do something else. Don't by the way, don't use that as an excuse to soften every no that you ever do by saying, oh, I can't do that, but I'll do this instead. Only do it if you really want to do something else instead. There's scripts for saying you don't want to do something right now, but you'll be able to do the same thing next month, or I don't want to do this now, but I can delegate it. How about, this person doing it? So I've got all of these different scripts, and I did put them together in a PDF. So if you would like that PDF of work-related scripts, then just type a comment now and just say work scripts, please, and I'll get them sent over to you. But just to give you a few really simple ways of saying no straight off the bat, my number one way of saying no is, drum roll, no. That's it. As I read somewhere, brilliant, I read this some years ago, and then when I read it, I was like, oh God, yeah. No is a complete sentence. You don't have to explain why you're saying no. You could just say no. It's really easy, and then there's kind of no comeback for the other person from that. Sadly, I can't. That kind of expresses a kind of, a little bit of a feeling that, oh, I'm sorry that I can't, but I can't. But doesn't lead to any explanation. I'm sorry, but I'm not able to. A teeny tiny apology and I'm not able to, and that's it. And the beauty of these short ways of saying no is that you haven't given them anything to then work on you with, and you don't have to, sometimes you find yourself in kind of half truths and it all gets really awkward. But these are they feel slightly uncomfortable in the moment, just saying no. But that's what you're trying to say, and so it kind of just makes it short and sweet, and then the person has to deal with the fact you've said no, and then you can move on. So and then there's another one that I really like. If you're and I do use this a fair bit, if you don't know if you want to say no, if you've been kind of surprised by a request, whether that be at work, whether that be at home, whether that be your kids, your partner, your friends, your family, anything, when you're in the moment and they've surprised you, you don't have to say yes or no in the moment. You can ask for more time, remember? So you can always do that. So you can say, let me think about it, let me check my diary and I'll get back to you. And that just gives you a bit extra time, and then you can prepare yourself to say no if you then need to later on. So if you can say no in the moment, say it. But if you're not sure, you're genuinely not sure, or if you suddenly get confuzzled and you're like, I can't remember what I was going to say in this situation, say, let me think about it and I'll get back to you. It just gives you a bit of breathing space. Also, I'm just picking some things out of the scripts. So like I say, you'll see these if you ask for the scripts. Turning something down. Here's a nice way that I like to use. I really appreciate you asking me, but my time is fully committed. I mean, you can't argue with that really, can you? My time is fully committed. It's almost like, you're almost like putting it out of your hands. Oh, I just can't fit that in. So that's all related to kind of work stuff, although you can use some of those things in outside of work as well. I also have some notes. Now, I don't have them together in a PDF, but if enough people wanted it, I could put it together. I have some notes on saying no in more kind of social family situations, because as much as it's good to say no to extra tasks and meetings and what have you at work, quite often we overcommit ourselves to volunteer opportunities or stuff at our kids' school, or friends asking us to do stuff, or not so good friends asking us to do stuff, and we can end up filling our lives full of quite a lot of stuff just because we don't want to offend people and say no about it. So I do have some bits and bobs about saying no in social situations. So if you would like me to put that together, then just pop in the chat now and just say social scripts, and I'll put those together for you. I'm going to do it at some point or other anyway, but I'll put it together now if that would be useful. So I just picked a few things out for you today. Let's say that you were invited to a party that you don't want to go to for whatever reason. It could be a really good friend, but you just don't feel like it this week, or it could be an acquaintance and you don't really want to go, or whatever it is. Thanks for the invite. Okay, you're thanking them. Thanks for the invite. It's nice to be polite. I won't be able to make it because I'm taking the weekend to regroup after this very hectic week. Looks like it's going to be a great party. I hope you have a great time. What I really like about that one is, at the same time as kind of saying, I really need to regroup this weekend, so I'm just chilling out, you're kind of being a bit of a leader there, because we've all felt like that, haven't we? We've all felt like it's been absolutely mad this week and I actually need some time off this weekend. And by being somebody who stands up and respects your own time and your own energy levels, you're giving other people permission to do the same for themselves. So that, I think that's a really great kind of leadership moment as you're saying no as well, which is nice. Have you got somebody in your life who requires a lot of your energy and asks for a lot of your support, and you really want to help them, but they're probably taking too much of your energy and time, and you just want to bring the boundary back a bit? You don't want to say no completely, but you just need to reel it in a little bit. Here's one for you. So, I'm sorry that you're having such a hard time. I can't stay over all weekend, or I can't do whatever it is that they've asked you to do, but I'm free at the moment. How can I support you? So in the scripts, you'll see a lot of things are like, there's some scripts for, I can't do this big thing, but I could do this little thing, if that's what you're really prepared to do. Volunteering, I mentioned this a few times. This was probably my bête noire, as on top of everything else, was volunteering for stuff, particularly when no one else will stand up to the plate and you feel like, oh God, somebody needs to do it and it's going to be me. So how about, I feel honoured by you asking me, but I have to say no this time. I love that so much. Or this is okay. So this is one that would always really get me. You know, when someone asks you to do something or volunteer for something, and you feel really bad because you know that if you don't do it, they're going to end up doing it, right? That's the thing that really gets you, isn't it? I realised that by saying no, this is going to end up back on your plate. Is there some small way I can be helpful? Okay, so you're giving them a little. You're kind of saying no to the big piece. You're recognizing and acknowledging that it's going to end up being them doing it, and you're giving them a little bit of help. But as I've said before, don't offer these little bits of help if you don't really want to. If you really just don't want to do something, just say you don't want to do it. So, just to kind of recap what we've talked about doing a bit of inner work and thinking about how you feel about saying no, and what your beliefs are, and what you would like your beliefs to be, and what beliefs would really support you. And by the way, I didn't mention at the time, but when you're thinking about what beliefs really support you, it's good to think about what you want to say no to. Now, one way to kind of determine this is if you've done any of my workshops or the recent Afghanistan fundraiser, and you've done your 1 year vision, you can look at your 1 year vision and think, well, in order to make this happen, what do I need to start saying no to? Or if you've done some other sort of goal setting exercise, what do you need to say no to make your goals happen? You can also have a bit of a think about what are your real kind of sticking points. What are the places and situations and people to which you often say yes and you really regret it afterwards and wish you'd said no. So those are the things to kind of start on. So if you're always saying yes to things that your kids' school are asking you to do, then that's obviously a place to focus. But if you're feeling really nervy about saying no, and you're really like, when I started this process, I was just so terrible at saying no. I had to really go back to basics. The very first thing you can do is a really simple exercise. Sounds a bit mad, but stand in front of the mirror and practice saying no. Just practice saying it, and just say it again and again and again. You could do it for like a minute after you brush your teeth. I mean, obviously your family is going to think you're bonkers, but just start saying no into the mirror, and just like get used to that word coming out of your mouth without kind of cringing. You can also then move on to saying no to small things. I always say, next time someone offers you a cup of tea, say no. I mean, you end up not having a cup of tea, which is a bit of a bugger, but just saying no to things that are inconsequential. When the waiter comes to you at the restaurant or pub and asks if you want mayonnaise, you say no, no sauces, no. Just start saying no to as many things as you can, and just start getting those words to come out of your mouth very naturally. And then you could pick one script from the scripts that I send you if you want those, or you can write your own little script that's kind of written specially for a situation or a person that you know you need to deal with and say no to more often. Write your script down and practice it over and over again in the mirror till it comes out really naturally. And then take every opportunity you can to use that script. And you know what? You might fluff it the first few times, you might bottle out the first time, you might get your words mixed up, and you might end up agreeing. That's fine, it's all good. Just keep trying. And as you keep trying, it will become more and more natural to you. You'll have situations where you say no and it's fine, and then you're like, oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. And then each success will help you to build yourself up, try new scripts, try saying no, and before you know it, you will be Warren Buffett. He was the guy that they say he says no to almost everything, and he's like a multi-billionaire. You will find yourself more like Warren Buffett. Hopefully not too much like Warren Buffett. Is he Buffett or is he Buffett? Kind of like the idea that he's buffet when he's not really buffet. Anyway, I digress greatly. If you have any questions, or if you have a specific situation that you find really difficult to say no to, or you want any kind of support around this, then let me know in the comments below, and I will look in later and answer your questions or give you some ideas about how you can say no more often. So go forth, say no, and I hope you have a wonderful week. See you soon.